What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'd like to take a deep dive into looking at Destiny 1 and, in my opinion, how it shaped essentially the live service model that we know today and have come to normalize. Okay? And honestly, I think it goes without saying that they were really one of the first studios to show others that, at least other first person shooter studios, that it was possible to go on adding content year after year and consistent updates that would, you know, make an end come to the Call of Duty regulatory 1 year life cycle, 4 expansions in that life cycle days come to an end. And with that being said, without further ado, here we go. Destiny, the game, launched to us on September 1st, 2014 for Xbox One and PlayStation 4, after first being hinted at years prior in Halo 3 ODST with a small poster on a wall and one of the levels that you could find that would hint at Bungie's next project to come. There were 21 base story missions in the original Destiny before the first expansion, 7 strikes, 10 crucible maps, and a litany of side missions and quests like exotic bounties. The game's first raid, the Vault of Glass, would launch alongside it as well, but gave players 1 week to gear up and beat the story before being able to jump in and take on Atheon and the other treacherous beings that would await them within the Vault of Glass. Overall, the game's launch was confusing to most, myself included, as it was seen as a new genre for many players who expected a game similar to the studio's previous Halo games, especially considering that it was going to be a new sci-fi epic and a first-person shooter. Many people, like I said, myself included, were just expecting something more along the lines of Halo in general. The story made little to no sense, and the raid was mostly unknown to many players, especially seeing as it had no matchmaking alongside it, so players were forced to wait in the tower asking other players if they would take on the raid with them. Or, and this was really only known to some people that were, I guess, more tech savvy or more, ahead of the time, maybe the older crowds. You could go to external sites like LFG sites to find other players and, see if they wanted to do it with you as well. And that's mostly for people that just couldn't befriend the Guardians organically within the game, like going through Crucible games or strikes or waiting in the tower even. I remember my first attempt at Vault of Glass, I literally sat within the tower just messaging people until I got a hit, and then one guy just brought me in with his friends, and that's who I did raids with for many weeks to come. Many players still new to loot. Rarity in games, tied with the rarity of exotics, meant that most players did not understand the end game of Destiny and forced them to not see the point in completing the same tasks over and over at higher difficulty. Due to minimal explanation, this meant that if players were lucky enough to get an exotic early on in the game, they were unlikely to understand the severity of what just took place, with only one raid for the end game and most of the resources tied to it to climb the level system. This also meant that many players were stuck somewhere within the high 20s, as the cap was 30 at the time. And then a new meme would be birthed known as the Forever 29s. And then honestly, with the exotic issue as well, like again, myself included, not really understanding the rarity system at the time either, it just really meant that like if you out leveled that exotic, most people would just destroy it, not realizing how rare they were, and not even realizing that they didn't have legendary gear, so maybe there was something higher than the yellow, or maybe they just didn't understand the difference between the green, blue, purple, and yellow at all. And just 2 weeks into Destiny's life, we saw the addition of our first community event, if you could even call it that. This being the Queen's Wrath, which launched on September 23rd, 2014, lasted about 2 weeks, and it would see players visiting Petrovenge for unique bounties to get some unique rewards, such as guns, armor, and shaders and emblems as well. This was really the first edition that would bring us a lived-in feeling for Destiny as we know it today. A lot of those guns would not be brought back at all, and some of them we wouldn't see until many years later within Destiny 2, and the rest of them are just history now, essentially. Some of the armor would make a return with Rise of Iron at the end of the life cycle, but it was very rare and very far between. But again, this would give us our first hint that they had bigger plans for Destiny 1 and wanted it to actually be a lived-in world. We fast forward now to December 9th, 2014, and the launch of the first expansion, The Dark Below. And if you are a Destiny vet, you would know that this is going to be the expansion that we would see our first real big bad from the solar system and from the quests that we would experience in the story that actually seemed like it was a part of the story, as for many players, they thought that Atheon just didn't really tie well into the story at all. But Crota, being hinted at on some of the moon missions, would. And so this would really see the Guardian return to the moon to stop Crota, the son of Oryx, from resurrecting himself in a hive ritual. This expansion would contain 3 new Crucible maps, 1 new strike, and a level cap increase to a whopping 32, as well as our first brand new raid, and that would, kind of take a loose term later on throughout the game's life cycle, as it was one of the easiest raids in history, probably in gaming history, to be honest with you. And most people would joke about it just being a glorified strike, but it would launch on the same launch day, not requiring players to gear up at all to prepare for it, but it would just, allow you to jump in after you finish the 3 measly story missions that the expansion would launch with, and it would bring a new armor set, a new set of raid gear, and one of the 4 new exotics, at least exotic weapons. We saw 9 introduced for armor pieces, 3 for each of the classes, and that's exotic armor pieces. And overall, despite not containing too much content for the game, this expansion would be responsible for holding players over for a whole 5 months while we waited for something else to be given to us. And at the time, man, 2 raids was cool and everything, but again, with most players not even realizing the kind of game that this was supposed to be, it really had players itching and wanting more. And, with, if I'm not mistaken, The Dark Below launched at a price point of $20, $19.99. They would also kind of find it hard to trust Bungie with the next expansion also being released at $19.99, and just in hope that it had some more oomph to it, meat on its bones. But, again, we would see our next expansion in May 2015 on the 19th with Destiny, the House of Wolves. And this would see the Guardian hunting the House of Wolves leader Skolas as he escapes the prison of elders, and he would seek to unify the fallen houses. This DLC would include no new raid, but 2 brand new game modes, one being a new competitive Crucible playlist known as the Trials of Osiris that would see Guardians face off head-to-head in a 3v3 game mode where each player would have 1 life and have the possibility of resurrecting their teammates, and it would see the first team to hit 5 points win the game. And the whole premise of it was essentially to win 7 games in a row without loss, and you would go to the lighthouse for in-game level gear. It would be locked to only the weekends and would first go live on May 22nd, 2019, just 3 days after the expansion launched on that first weekend. The other game mode would be the Prison of Elders, a brand new PvE multi-round arena activity where the players would fight through several waves of enemies and a random boss fight at the end. And if I'm not mistaken, it was 3 rounds, and you would eventually, progress and finish it. And instead of getting a raid this time around, we would just get a beefed up version of the Prison of Elders to face off against the fabled Skolas Kell of Kells, and a unique twist on endgame activities. This endgame activity would reward you with one of 3 new exotics that were introduced with this expansion, and those were going to be the Fallen weapons. They were very unique, but it would also bring us a new weapon type with that, being Drang as a sidearm instead of a hand cannon. It would in total have a 5 exotic weapons with it, and 9 armor pieces that were exotic across the board. We would also see the addition of some vendors and the new social space known as the Reef. So we would get Varix, Brother Vance, and Petrovenge. And it would also raise our light level from 32 to 34 now. I know they were getting absolutely crazy with these level cap increases. It was just unheard of. But hey, if you're a Destiny vet, the grind was still absolutely real. Okay? And to tie out the first year of Destiny, a new event would come around known as the Moments of Triumph, which would, see players going through significant milestones throughout the year. And if you would complete them, you would get a new t-shirt or a emblem. If you would have to buy the t-shirt, of course, as nothing is free, at least that comes to you in the real world. But this Moments of Triumph would bring us all of the way to September 14th, the day before the start of year 2. Overall, the first year of Destiny, though it didn't have much content, it would lay the groundwork for a true live service game, as we would see the addition of the one, community event, as well as these expansions that were still falling into the same, 1-year life cycle thought process, small story, small additions to the games, but overall weekly resets, weekly additions, consistent updates and changes to the game, and like the power of some of the weapons, and just overall stat changes. It would give us our first taste of that lived-in experience. And honestly, with a few other things that the House of Wolves introduced, like being able to re-roll your weapons, and being able to do a resource exchange, it was very, I guess you could say, player beneficial, or I guess pro player choice, allowing us to have control over more aspects of our gear and loadout. But unfortunately, that would all come to an end at the start of year 2, as everything within year 1 would be left behind us, as many players were new to the MMO style that they were trying to go for. Most players were not ready to let go of their year 1 weapons, myself included, as many people saw it as not respecting players' times for a game that, is all on chance, essentially playing like a slot machine with, RNGesus being behind it. You would just essentially see all of your hard work go. And they basically did this as a way to get rid of some of the stuff that they introduced that was more game breaking, such as, Invective and Icebreaker, which were two exotics, one a shotgun, one a sniper, that would regenerate ammo for you without you having to do anything, as well as what we know now as the Black Spindle, being, a launch sniper with the first expansion. It was originally a legendary, and it regenerated ammo so hard that it just basically broke everything in the game, because it would give you infinite ammo if you hit your crits. So for some of the strikes that were Nightfalls, it just became, too much. So they wanted a fresh start. And with September 15th, 2015, we would get that fresh start with the Taken King. And basically, it was shown that many players would realize that the Taken King was probably supposed to be the first real expansion, and the other two expansions were really more so just parts of the original game that they cut out to make expansions to give us something to sell. But this is where the real meat and bones and identity of Destiny really came from. We would get our second raid with Oryx as the boss, and we would see the addition of about 35 exotics or so, and 27 at least returning from year one. This main expansion was to destroy Oryx, because he was coming to avenge his son, and you were essentially, taking him out in his own realm, but that wouldn't take place until after the story, and then you would have access to the raid. This expansion would also include one new subclass for each of the Guardians for their missing element at launch. For example, Titans would get a solar subclass. If I'm not mistaken, Warlocks got an arc, and Hunters got Void. It would have 4 new strikes, 9 new Crucible maps, with one being exclusive to PlayStation for that year. And we would also get our, second roundup of PlayStation exclusive exotics. The expansion also brought us our next all new quest system with 105 quests that ranged from side missions to small bounties. And these were separate from the 8 main story missions that we got. But among the new exotics introduced, we got our hands on 3 class-specific exotic weapons. An AR for Titans, a hand cannon for Hunters, and a scout for Warlocks. And beside all of the reworks and additions to the game and the expansion, it retired most of the unknown to players this year would also be jam-packed with the true start of the live service feeling, with the start of the Festival of the Lost that launched on October 26, 2015, going all the way to November 9th, 2015. This event introduced candy bags and masks for players to hunt after, as well as a bunch of new emotes. The tower got a new makeover, as well as some new music that would occasionally play for players. And it wasn't too much that was added, but for most players, it was seen as a very good addition to the game because it wasn't announced. It came out of nowhere, to most players' surprise. And it overall, got the morale of the player base up. We would see our next event come around December 8th through the 29th, which would go on to add a number of exotics to the Year 2 upgrade and rework some, but was mainly remembered for the introduction of the Sparrow Racing League, as players have begged for the return of this, and it's unfortunately come to the new Destiny Rising before it's come back to us, but that's not here nor there, unfortunately. Bungie, please make it right, please. We want it back. Why is it so hard to give us something that a mobile game can add in immediately. But right around the corner from the December update was the introduction of Crimson Days from February 9th to the 15th in 2016, introducing the unique Crimson Doubles playlist to the game, where there was no matchmaking and several unique buffs to the players the game had. We had Reunited, which increased ability recharge rate for players staying close to each other. Broken Heart, giving increased ability regen and a portion of their health back when their teammate was defeated, as well as one debuff for players who strayed just a little bit too far from their companion with Falling Apart, giving enemies an enemy waypoint to find players and see them easier, I suppose you could say, to take them out. We also got a few emotes, some ghost shells, some shaders, and an emblem or two, as these rewards were available from some bounties from shacks at the tower. And, the tower saw a new revamp in decorations for players to explore around. And the event overall was another success for the limited time that it was around. And that would hold us over for about another month or so until we would get the April update in 2016 on April 12th. This update raised the light level all the way to 335, and it introduced a 1-to-1 infusion system rather than gradually infusing to the higher number. So before this, like infusion, you would take a 330 weapon and you would put it into like a level 50 weapon, and it would take it up to like 270 instead of all the way to 330, which aggravated the hell out of many players because it would basically like make you use so many resources that just was not necessary. And it gave Guardians a new activity with the Challenge of Elders and a new strike in the Blighted Chalice, with a little short story content that led up to the strike. This update also included Chroma Gear, which added glows to certain armor pieces for the first time ever, and Year 1 exotics got reworks, updates to Year 2 versions. Vault space was increased, and new Sterling Treasure was added to be redeemed at Eververse for various rewards that you could purchase or earn, like maybe up to 3 a week, I suppose. Not very much, but at least it was something. Unlike today, where they just give you Bright Dust and a few that you can buy throughout the week. PlayStation got their hands on a new Legendary set, as well as a new exotic sniper and a new exclusive quest line. Overall, the best introduction was our first taste of Taken Gear, with a unique shotgun from another strike and a sword that could drop, and a revamped new look to the Prison of Elders gear armor from the year prior, but it was given a new Taken makeover. And you could earn these from the Sterling Treasure, as well as the Chroma Gear from the Sterling Treasure. Again, you got 3 free chances a week, and if you didn't get it then you would just result to buying them, unless you're me and you just waited for months and months until you finally pulled it all, and then you wore the Taken Gear a year later when it was already outdated and out of fashion. But July 7th through September 19th would be our second annual Moments of Triumph, which would be leading us up to the final year and final expansion of Destiny 1 with the Rise of Iron on September 20th. Now, for the launch of the Rise of Iron, it did come out with a new campaign and a new space known as the Siva Lands, or Plague Lands, not the Siva Lands. I'm so foolish for that, as Ashen Iron has rotted my brain with how bad it is right now. Not being the Rise of Iron, but the new update to Destiny 2 that we're in that saw the return of the lands, sans the plague part. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Anyways, there were 5 main story missions that came with the Rise of Iron, as well as 1 brand new strike and 2 more that would be brought forward with reprisals in the Devil's Lair and the Summoning Pits. 1 new and final raid with the Wrath of the Machines. For Crucible maps, a new social a new social space as Fellwinter's Peak, 7 exotic weapons, with a few returning and coming in later in the year, 7 new exotic armor pieces, 3 for warlocks, and hunters and titans would only receive 2. We also got the introduction of ornaments for exotics, changing their looks for the first time ever, that you could purchase from Eververse and Xur, and occasionally, very rarely, earnable. In October, we would see the return of the Festival of the Lost with more emotes, masks, and shaders, as well as unique ornaments coming in as well for some more guns. The event would go a step further as well with the first official Dawning event. Game would go a step further with the first official Dawning event coming to Destiny to us in December that year, which would bring 2 of the new exotics and would bring back Icebreaker from the bench in year 1. We would sadly not see the return of Crimson Days in February shortly after that, but we would not have to wait too much longer, as we would get the final and last update on March 28th, 2017 with the Age of Triumph. And this would be responsible for carrying players over until the surprise announcement of Destiny 2, but with the Age of Triumph, it included a revamp of all of the raids, new armor sets for all of the raids, new ornaments for the raid gear, and the guns being brought up to adept versions, allowing some of the primaries to get elemental damage back or have elemental damage added to them if they were, year 2 and 3 versions when it was taken away. But this would cost you your exotic slot if you would want to use that adept version with the elemental damage. It would also bring us a sort of checklist that would be like the record book for the Ages of Triumph that would allow you to, check off some of the larger monumental steps for the game. But overall, I would say that this really does show that Destiny was ahead of the time in the sense of bringing that MMO style of a lived-in space to the mainstream for a lot of basic FPS shooters players, because most players were not playing like World of Warcraft or even knew what those things were. They were not known to this style of game, and it really showed other studios that FPS games could succeed with consistent updates regularly and, stuff being added to the game and making a lived-in world. It would go on to start the trend of, other games being live service and being, updated weekly and changed weekly, with large updates rolling out every few months that added, new content and changed content, which would later see, a huge takeoff and a huge mainstream addition with it coming to Call of Duty, Fortnite, Battlefield, Halo, and the list goes on. But overall, I really think that we were ahead of the times. Did they do it in a perfect way? Not really. But hey, nothing's ever perfect at first. And unfortunately, with it going on for so long, you could even say that they've kind of lost the plot a little bit. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for stopping by. I apologize if there's some information in here that is not 100% accurate. Trying to find the info on a lot of this is very difficult nowadays, with Google mostly trying to spew at you misinformation and just plain out wrong information from their stupid AI bot. But overall, I tried to do my best. This is my first attempt at one of these kinds of videos. I apologize for all of the stir-ups and hiccups and everything. But if you like content like this, please let me know down below, and I'll try and roll out some more. But I do appreciate you guys stopping by and checking out the video. Drop a like, drop a subscribe for me, and hit me in the comments down below, and I'll try and get back to as many of you as possible. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.